أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله حمدا لا ينفد أفضل ما ينبغي أن يحمد وصلى الله وسلم على أفضل المصطفين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تعبد. Alhamdulillah, welcome to lesson 2. Inshallah, we will continue with our author's introduction to his book or his booklet Waraqaat. And before we continue, it is important just to revise what we had covered in the previous lesson. We discussed what the benefits of studying usul al-fiqh were. So I would like, inshallah, that everyone post this on the forums, inshallah, that everyone may benefit from them. We also discussed the two schools that developed in usul al-fiqh. But before that, we discussed how or who was the first person to actually write in usul al-fiqh. We spoke about his book. What was his book called? So inshallah, it is important that we in our studies, many people before the exams or during the semester, you find people ask questions on the forums. How can we, what study tips do you suggest? And one of the ways that I find useful is that I convert the study material into questions. Like, who was the first person to write in usul al-fiqh? Who edited the book and checked it? What were the two schools? What is the difference between the first school and the second school? And so on and so on. So that helps to understand the material in a way that you not normally get by just reading and trying to memorize certain facts. So inshallah, this is something that I would like to do, and sometimes we're not consistent with it, but something that I would like to do, that we actually go and revise every single lesson. So I will leave you with a few questions at the end of every lesson, inshallah, so that it makes it easy for your study in the future, and that you are able to revise constantly, and instead of having to wait until the end, just 2 or 3 weeks before the exam, and now everyone wants to study and so forth. No, inshallah, our knowledge, like we always tell you, it's not about the exams. The exams are just a mere formality. But what is important is that you are taking the knowledge, you are benefiting from it, and that you are passing it on to others. This is what is extremely beneficial. The author, he continues and he says, وَالْأَحْكَامُ سَبْعَةٌ. He says that there are 7 rulings. So firstly, the first word he uses is al-ahkam. Al-ahkam is the plural of the word hukam. And a hukam is a ruling. Okay, so you have one hukam and we have ahkam, many rulings. So that's important that we understand the word and understand its singular and its plural. So when we find it used in other books, immediately we understand what is meant. He says that there are 7 rulings. The author does not divide or does not tell us whether or not these ahkam or these rulings fall under different categories. But we know that they do fall under different categories. And one category is called al-ahkam al-taklifiyya, and the second category is called al-ahkam al-wad'iyya. Again, the first category of rulings in Islam is called al-taklifiyya. Those rulings that have a that everyone has legal responsibility to perform. So taklif comes from giving responsibility, or giving someone, or making it compulsory for someone to do something, or making it prohibited or forbidden for someone to do something. So that's where the word taklif comes from, giving someone responsibility to do or to refrain. And the second category of ahkam is called al-ahkam al-wad'iyya. And these are the ahkam which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have placed as signs that a particular act or a particular contract is valid and whether or not this is to be given is to be validated in any way or to be honored in any way. Okay, so we will inshallah discuss this as we go. But he says that there are 7. Okay, so he has basically restricted them to 7. There are more, and when we discuss the last 2, inshallah, I'll mention to you some of the others that have been mentioned. He says al-wajibu wal-mandubu wal-mubahu wal-mahdhuru wal-makruhu wal-sahihu wal-batilu. He says that they are the obligatory, the recommended, the merely permissible, the forbidden, the offensive, sound, and invalid. The author then moves on and he discusses it in greater detail. And we find that also, like we saw in Nukhbatul Fikr, that here the author sometimes, not always, he follows a very logical pattern in his thinking. So he mentioned wajib first, and then so therefore wajib is going to be the first thing that he discusses in detail. Then he said mandub next, so he'll discuss mandub after wajib, and in the same order that he mentioned them at first. This is how he's going to discuss them later. Now, the usuliyun, they do not use the words wajib, mandub, mubah, mahdhur, makruh, wal-sahih, wal-batil. Rather, these terms are used by the fuqaha, the people who actually, whose main focus is fiqh. These are the terms they use, because these are the terms that are given to the act itself, not to the concept, the ruling, or the manner in which that ruling was reached. I know this sounds confusing, but inshallah we will discuss it in a little bit more detail as we cover each one. What I'm saying is that when I say salah is wajibah, that is something that a faqih would discuss. But what is the usuli? What is he looking at? The usuli is the one whose field is usul fiqh. What is he looking at? He is looking at it from the point of view as compulsion, not compulsory. This is compulsory, but he's looking at compulsion. He's looking at prohibition, not the fact that this is prohibited. Okay? So he's looking at how that became compulsory. How did that become prohibited? So he's looking at the process and not the final or the actual, the consequences of those particular actions and what we then term those acts. This is wajib, this is haram, and so on and so on. So that's an important point that we need to make, that the author here is not being very technical in his discussion of these matters. He is not, as they say, لا يصير على طريقة قومه. He is not following in the footsteps of his colleagues. Because, and the excuse we might find for the author here is that he doesn't want to confuse the beginner. He doesn't want to, come up with all these ijab and wajib and really confuse him, because all he wants to do is to facilitate, the understanding of the basics. Doesn't even want to confuse you, but it's important that we discuss it, because our discussion or our classes are a little bit more in depth. So therefore we need to talk about it inshallah and just mention, go into it a little bit more deeply, so that we understand that there are certain things that are not very technical in the book, that have been, the author subhanallah has overlooked for obviously good reasons. I mean, these reasons that he has or had were totally valid from his point of view. But we need to show you that there is a difference between compulsion and compulsory, and so on and so on. So he says, and he defines, he says, فَالْوَاجِبُ مَا يُثَابُ عَلَى فِعْلِهِ وَلَا يُعَاقَبُ عَلَى تَرْكِهِ. He says that the wajib is anything for which one is rewarded if you perform it, and you will be punished if you omit it. Now, this is not the definition of wajib. Okay? This is the benefit of wajib, or this is the outcome of a wajib. Okay? I hope that's clear. This is not the definition of wajib and what it is per se, but rather this is what will happen if that which is wajib is actually implemented, Or if it is omitted, what then would be the consequences? So this is the consequences of the action and not the definition of what it really is. And inshallah, when we end off our discussion of these 5 issues, we'll discuss this in more detail inshallah, and we will give you the definition of every one of these ahkam, or these 5 at least, in the way that the scholars of usul al-fiqh have defined it. And again, our excuse for the author is that he wishes to facilitate the understanding of these issues for the student of usul al-fiqh, the beginner. He doesn't want to confuse him with too much technicality. So what is the difference between ijab and wajib? So we said wajib is the act itself, and he said ijab is the act, or the process of making something compulsory or obligatory. Okay? And in the same way, many other issues are discussed in this manner. Okay, so when we get to them, we talk about karaha. Karaha is the dislike. Okay, or is the process, or is the act of making something disliked or despicable. Right? But if something is makruh, that particular act is disliked. So hopefully, inshallah, that is clear, and we will, inshallah, more examples, it will become even clearer. He then says, وَالْمَنْدُوبُ مَا يُثَابُ عَلَى فِعْلِهِ وَلَا يُعَاقَبُ عَلَى تَرْكِهِ. The recommended, or the mandub, is anything for which one is rewarded if performed, yet not punished for if omitted. Again, the author, as he does with every single thing, and we will talk about now, after this, he is not giving us, he is giving us the consequence of performing that particular act or omitting that act. He is not actually defining what mandub really is. So, technically, you should not have used the word mandub, but rather the word an-nadb. Okay? Recommendation. Not recommended. Recommended is the act itself. But recommendation is the process of making something recommended. Okay? مَا يُثَابُ عَلَى فِعْلِهِ. So the mandub, if you do it, you will be rewarded. If you do it for the sake of Allah, and that is important, please write this down. That recommended is anything for which one is rewarded if performed for the sake of Allah. Right? Whether you want to write it in brackets or not, that is up to you. But it is important that you do that. Because if someone does something which is sunnah, he performs it, but he does it for other than Allah, to show off, to show people. So people can see, mashallah, look at this pious person, he's doing, he's performing tahajjud, or he's doing so forth and so forth. If that is the intention, then obviously that is not permissible, and that person will be punished. That person's actions will not be accepted. So it is important that we add the term for this, or the phrase, for the sake of Allah, or sincerely for Allah. Yet will not be punished for if omitted. So example again, tahajjud. If you do not perform tahajjud, there is no punishment upon you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not hold you accountable for having not performed tahajjud or the night prayer any time in your life. If you've never performed tahajjud in your life, you will not be held accountable for this in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease our matters for us and facilitate them, inshaAllah. وَلَا يُعَاقَبُ عَلَى تَرْكِهِ. And the person will not be punished if omitted. There are a few synonyms which we find in the books of the scholars which they use for the word mandub. Some of that is as-sunnah, the next word is al-nafl, and the last word is al-mustahab. We'll say them again. That there are synonyms for the word mandub. One of them is as-sunnah, other is nafl, and the third one is mustahab. Okay, and perhaps the words that should be used are the words mustahab, nafl, and mandub. The author then goes and discusses the next issue, which is the mubah. He says, وَالْمُبَاحُ مَا لَا يُثَابُ عَلَى فِعْلِهِ وَلَا يُعَاقَبُ عَلى تَرْكِهِ. The merely permissible matter is anything for which one is neither rewarded if performed, nor punished for if omitted. Now, the technical term for this concept is al-ibaha. Al-ibaha meaning permissibility. And when I say that a particular thing is permissible, I will call that particular thing mubah. So it is mubah to eat. It is mubah to swim. and so on and so. It is mubah to drive a car. We cannot say that it is recommended, you will be rewarded for driving a car, nor is it compulsory to drive a car. Rather, it is mubah, it is merely permissible. So, the process of making something permissible, that is called al-ibaha. The act itself, or the thing itself, is called mubah. Again, this is not the definition of what mubah is. Some scholars have even criticized other scholars who actually mention mubah under one of the rulings of the Sharia. They say that if Allah has not ordered it, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not prohibited it, and has not discussed it in any matter, then therefore it's not part of deen, it does not have to be discussed under one of the rulings of deen. But we want to give those issues which do not directly fall under any commands or prohibitions, or any mention, there needs to be a particular place for them in the Sharia, so that people are not confused, and people do not ask, is this permissible? Is this compulsory? Is this haram? Rather, when it is classified as being mubah, immediately the person understands that it is permissible for me to do. If I don't do it, there's no sin in that. And if I do it, there's also no reward in it, no sin. The next and the fourth issue which the author mentions, he says, وَالْمَحْذُورُ. Now, we are not very familiar with this term, mahdhur. Rather, we know muharram. And here the author, subhanallah, he uses a term which is mahdhur. Mahdhur basically means prohibited, that which should not be done. He says, مَا يُثَابُ عَلَى تَرْكِهِ. Forbidden is anything for which one is rewarded if omitted, meaning avoided. And if a person does it, he will be punished if he does it, if he performs it. Okay, so again, the forbidden is that if you don't do it, you will be rewarded, and if you do it, you will be punished. As it has preceded, the author does not give us technical definition of what muharram exactly is. Rather, he gives us the consequences of the action. If you do it, there's punishment. If you don't do it, there's a reward. But very important to add this particular part or phrase into the definition, that if you don't do it for the sake of Allah. If you don't do it for the sake of Allah. So what is the evidence for this particular issue? The fact that the Prophet ﷺ, he says in the hadith, إِذَا الْتَقَى الْمُسْلِمَانِ بِسَيْفَيِّمَا فَالْقَاتِلُ وَالْمَقْتُولُ فِي النَّارِ. When two Muslims meet, fighting one another with their swords, then the murderer and the murdered person will both be in the fire of Jahannam. So the Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, this is shocking, this is strange. Why would they both be in Jahannam? The one is definitely the sinner, and the other one is, what could he possibly have done wrong? The Prophet ﷺ replied, كَانَ حَرِيصًا عَلَى قَتْلِ أَخِيهِ. That he was eager to kill his brother. So he did not. The only thing that prevented him from carrying out the sin was not his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but rather he did not kill the other Muslim because he was killed first. So therefore it is important that when we add this into the consequence rather of muharram or haram, it is important for us to mention that this if that which is haram is avoided and omitted and left out because the person has feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and has done so for the sake of Allah, there is reward in that. But if the person merely leaves it because he is prevented from doing it. And in other examples, a person wishes to gamble, wishes to indulge in this major sin. The person goes all the way to the casino, and when he gets to the casino, he finds that the casino is closed. What has prevented him from gambling? His fear of Allah? Definitely not. That which has prevented him from committing this sin is the fact that he has been prevented, that it is closed. There's no way that he could have done it. And there are other examples, the bar, the brothel. If the person on the way there fears, subhanallah, how could I go? How could I go and disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like this? Then, if he leaves it because of that is the reason, for that reason, then he will be rewarded. And if he leaves it and avoids it merely because he finds that the place is closed, or he is involved in a traffic accident and therefore cannot make his way to this place of haram, then that person would still be punishable because of his intention to do haram. We will take a short break, inshaAllah, and when we come back after the break, we will go on to discuss makruh, and we'll also discuss, inshaAllah, the two other matters which the author mentions, as-sahih and al-batil. I will see you after the break, bi-idhnillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.